because we have lost confidence in the forces of law and order, and as a protest against what they have done to the people of this area, you've taken the upholding of law and order in this area into your own hands. That means that it's your job and your responsibility to protect both persons and property in this area. The law and order in this district is the responsibility of the residents of this district and not of the police. The police are not allowed into this area. This is our form of protest against what they did here last weekend.
That means keep them out.
That means keep them out.
It's left on our shoulders now, just.
Yes. Okay, understood.
Yes.
So when the rest of Londonderry is getting ready for bed, the old poor Bogside area, where 5,000 Catholics live, becomes a self-imposed ghetto, sealed off by barricades guarded by vigilantes. This is one of the fantastic frontiers in the middle of a British city that have drawn journalists and television cameramen from a dozen countries. Now, nearly a quiet week after the rioting that followed the end of the Civil Rights March from Belfast, the barricades and the groups of vigilantes that patrol this area throughout the night might seem unrealistic drama. But the savagery of religious hate that led to all this was terrifyingly real, and the astonishing fact that the police have agreed to keep out of Bogside at night shows how dangerously the rule of law was threatened. The Protestant third rules the Catholic majority in this city, and Derry Catholics have borne civil injustices for generations. But in the early hours of that Sunday morning, the Catholics here in Bogside suffered the unbelievable. It was men of the overwhelmingly Protestant Royal Ulster Constabulary, the people here tell you, who rampaged through these streets in the early hours, smashing windows and yelling threats and challenges to Fenian bastards. These are the allegations, made in detail by many of the people here, that led Captain Long, the new Minister of Home Affairs in the Northern Irish government, to order an immediate inquiry. Not, however, an independent public inquiry that would command public confidence, but a private police investigation. This is the man who is conducting it, County Inspector Bailey.
I'm here in your interest. I'm not your enemy, I'm your friend. I would like to have the people's assistance, that the people could realise
set up an
that I'm here
impartial inquiry and you'll have all the assistance that you want.
I'm investigating alleged crimes.
By members of your own force.
Exactly.
The inspector is getting little cooperation, but the Citizens Action Committee that was formed after the earlier Londonderry rioting in October is taking depositions, and these will be given to the police and the public. Vice chairman and key figure of the committee is John Hume, former teacher who was brought up in Bogside. His intelligence network keeps him in constant touch with developments and regularly faces him with instant decisions which are never questioned.
Talk today of a march from the Labour Exchange into the middle of the city to the police barracks and so forth. Now, we don't want this. We want any action that we take to be completely controlled, and therefore, if you can see as many stewards as you can, get up there among the crowd and talk a bit of sense.
Bogside went on. A spectacular but sad drama played out to the rattle of stones, the clash of bottles, the strong whiff of tear smoke, and the flames from the petrol bomb. With this much hatred about, peace seems a forlorn hope. The fight took on a pattern. From the police point of view, it was a containing action to stop hooligans from Bogside from breaking out and spreading the rioting to other parts of the city. From the top of the flats, the Bogsiders had the clear advantage of height for their hail of rocks and petrol bombs. The only weapon the police had to reach them, the tear smoke gun. this, they had to run the gauntlet of the fire bombs which exploded round the armoured cars. Then the Bogsiders would advance on another front round the side of a block of flats, hurling their stones and rocks. And once again it took a baton charge to force them back. Since the latest run of trouble started in October, over 600 have been injured. Since then, they've been at full stretch for most of the time. And they're tired, very tired. They don't get much time for a break before they're fighting again and have to launch into another baton charge. Nearly 300 years ago, the Protestants of Derry were under siege from the Catholic armies of King James II. It's a grim turn of events that brought about the bitter reversal of history.
Inside the barricades in the Catholic Bogside area, the second day of siege is underway. The Bogside's now a vast pedestrian precinct with only a few vehicles moving about inside, and barricades at every street keep visitors and the police outside. The tear gas grenades, which have now been fired by the 100 at rioters, have brought deep bitterness in the Bogside. If anything, it's strengthened the determination to go on fighting the police just as long as their battered riot trucks and armoured cars are still to be seen. All day, the invisible gas, which collects in the centre of the low-lying area, drifts between the houses, and Bogsiders, with their eyes red and streaming, gather at street corners to bathe them. Many of them are convinced that the gas is stronger than the police say it is, and some are putting baking powder on their face, which is really an anti-mustard gas precaution. First aid posts are set up in houses and shops where members of the first aid organisation, the Knights of Malta, treat those who suffer most from the stinging gas, the children and old people.
The Battle of Bogside continued without a break into the evening. The pattern again much the same. Police dodging the flying petrol bombs, scattering flames in the streets, then retaliating with baton charges to try and force back the stone-throwing mob. And everywhere the reek of the tear-smoke bombs. As darkness fell, the police fell back about 50 yards, but still contained the area. Petrol bombs set fire to a shop in Little James Street, and within minutes the flames had reached a disused bakery, and the skies of Derry were alight with flames for the second night in a row. And as the fire spread, so did the toll of violence. About this time, the first warning shots were fired into the air by the police. A party of them were cut off from the main party and fired a number of shots. At Rosemount Police Barracks, the police were in a state of siege. During the day, the crowds had erected barricades, and by evening the police were unable to get out of their barracks. 2 shots were fired at policemen from a car in Union Hall Place. 2 men escaped from an overturned car after throwing a petrol bomb through a shop window, and this was well outside the Bogside area. Police discovered bottles and petrol in the back of the car. And as the burning went on, the Ulster B Specials were ordered into the Fountain Street area, not far from Bogside. Flames from a burning factory spread to the rear of Great James Street Presbyterian Church, and as men and women raced to clear the church of furnishings, there came the first talk of revenge. Unable to fight the fire from the rear, people formed a chain to clear the building. Gangs of men with clubs roamed the streets, and 2 firebombs were thrown into the City Hotel, used by journalists and civil rights workers, among others. Then, worst of all, news that 3 people had been taken to hospital with suspected gunshot wounds. 2 of them were not seriously hurt, but the 3rd was still in the operating theatre early today. a few hours, the Battle of Bogside turned into a personal duel between a lone petrol bomber and the Ulster police. The petrol bomber, known as the Lieutenant in Bogside, positioned himself on top of a block of new flats on the fringe of the Catholic area. And for hours he defied all the efforts of the police to dislodge him. From his position about 30 feet up, he kept on a continuous barrage of rocks and petrol bombs aimed at the police below. He never appeared for more than a few seconds, but whenever he did, it was the signal for the police to launch a hail of rocks at him. Sometimes he popped up to give the police a cheeky wave, but most of the time he was lobbing blazing bottles of petrol. At least 2 policemen had to roll on till the rioters up the street provoked a baton charge from the police. Then, as they ran by, rattling their riot shields, another bomb would be sent hurtling through the sky. After a while, he was joined by 2 or 3 other men who varied the line of attack. A few yards away, a house caught fire, a familiar sight in Bogside during the siege, and there was a temporary truce, the firemen forced the blaze. But as the area round Bogside burned, neither side seemed willing to lose face, and it took the British troops to stop the battle.
It's all over now, and the people of Bogside are happy with the soldiers, for the time being at least. But the soldiers weren't to know it was to turn out that way when they swept into the busy centre of Londonderry at 5:15 in the afternoon. Then their faces were expressionless, their drill well-rehearsed and swift, and even the peaceful part of the city into which their vehicles poured was taken by surprise. For 3 nights they'd been on full alert at Sea Eagle, the naval and air force base on the outskirts of Londonderry. They were tired, but compared with the exhausted remnants of the Royal Ulster Constabulary Force, which had been facing a ceaseless barrage of stones and petrol bombs by day and night, they looked fresh-faced, clean and eager. They moved straight into one of the worst-hit streets on the edge of the Bogside, carrying with them their ready-made barbed wire barricades and lining up in battle formation across the street where the air was foul with smoke and tear gas. Almost immediately, the weary police withdrew from their positions for a rest, and the B Specials, the part-time policemen so hated and feared by the Bogside Catholics, who'd only just appeared in the Londonderry streets ready to do battle with the rioters, found themselves redundant. In that first hour, the tension was almost unbearable. What would the soldiers do next? But they didn't have to fight. The stones and petrol bombs ceased, and slowly the Bogside fighters approached the newly installed barbed wire barricades.
They're good blokes. It seems fair.
They're not bigger, are they?
They're not bigger, they're not sectarian.
Well, they can't stay here forever, so what do you think is going to happen?
Well, get a police force of our own crowd made up, you know, not that crowd that were there. I mean, if the boys come back again, it's all going to start up again if them cops come back.
It was impossible to avoid comparing it all with the end of a siege, however self-imposed the siege may have been. Hundreds of Catholics flooded the streets and open spaces littered with the debris of the day and night battles. They talked in groups, walked round to inspect or marvel at the damage, and watched demolition men knock down what remained of a burned-out factory. The Londonderry Catholics have to find a way of getting rid of the troops eventually, and living with a police force which they so clearly mistrust. Failure to find the answer means more battles like this one, perhaps not so easy to quell.
In the Catholic Bogside itself, the Colonel seems to have acknowledged the authority of the Derry Citizen Defence Association. From their operations room in a small house, the chairman, Sean Keenan, now has a direct phone link to the Army Ops room. It's this that's used by Colonel Millman to sort out problems with the Catholics.
Largely the restoration of the public sort of services in the Bogside. For example, the GPO want to go back in and restore the telephone lines that are damaged. The garbage services and so on want to go in and return the refuse. The postman wants to get in with the mail. And we hope ultimately we may be able to restore the bus service. For the Ulster Bus Company, have got one of their best buses. One of their latest buys is on the barricade up north of the Craig. And we are now negotiating to remove that bus, which will require on the bus service. Either with replacing it with one of my barriers, which I would man, or with some rather more aged bus, which would not restrict the bus service.
The barricades that still block every vulnerable street in Bogside are the Army's next target. They hope to persuade the residents to take them down and allow troops to replace them. But the Derry Defence Association won't agree. Their information officer, Eamon McCann, explains why not.
I know that an awful lot of people would like us to take down our barricades and let them protect us. But there is no assurance from anyone as to what is going to happen when the army goes away. The most likely thing to happen, we imagine, is that the army, since it can't stay here forever, will at some point sort of pull out, and then a force, some force commanded by the Stalemate regime, would most likely try to reimpose its will on this area again. We are not going to have that happen until we have assurances, until our demands are met, in fact. The barricades will stay up.
But that could be it. The army will stay in Derry until there is a political solution. If that should be a long time coming, well, as the commander said, we've learnt patience in many parts of the world.
It's not clear what has caused the long delay in announcing a decision over the future of the 20 or so barricades here in the Bogside of Londonderry. The talks began at 11:30 this morning, and journalists were told that they'd get a statement about the future of the barricades around about noon. In fact, around about 2:30 we were told that the talks had broken off for lunch. Now, on the Citizens Defence Association side there are 4 representatives, and meeting them across the table are 3 representatives from the military. The talks are due to resume again this afternoon, and we're told that there may be a statement around about 6 o'clock. It would be wrong to say that there's been any great breakdown in the talks. I understand, in fact, that a wide measure of agreement has been reached. I talked to one of the delegates during the lunchtime break and said, did this represent half time in the proceedings? He said, no, we're well past half time. In fact, what I think has happened is that the Citizens Defence Association has asked for a number of guarantees from the military, and the military have asked for time to consider whether they can in fact grant these guarantees. But in the meantime, the barricades here remain. They'll certainly remain here tonight, and it may well be the weekend before they start to come down.
Okay, I'll be right back to move it.
There were very few vacant seats in the courtroom, and when Miss Devlin arrived, accompanied by her counsel, Sir Dingle Foote, who's another Westminster MP, they were greeted by a prolonged outburst of applause and foot stamping, which must have gone on for about a minute. The preliminaries took about half an hour to get through. First of all, Sir Dingle pleaded not guilty on Miss Devlin's behalf to all the 13 charges, and then it was agreed to hear the evidence together and not to take each case separately. This is a procedure which should save some time, but it does seem likely that the hearing will last for the best part of the week. For the Crown, Mr. Brian Hutton said the charges related to the 13th and 14th of August, when he said there was grave rioting in the city, which had begun on the previous day. The charges allege that she'd incited people to riotous and also to disorderly behaviour, that she herself was guilty of riotous or disorderly behaviour, that she had assaulted the police by throwing stones at them, and that she had used abusive language. He alleged that she had made 2 speeches which the Crown said constituted incitement. The magistrate, Mr. John Shearer, granted a defence application that both the defence and the Crown witnesses should leave the courtroom. The first of the Crown witnesses was Lieutenant Robbins, an Army intelligence officer who has already given evidence to the Scarman Tribunal. He told of what he'd seen during the disturbances. On the day of the Apprentice Boys' Parade, he said the police had very bravely stood and been stoned by a crowd for some 2 hours, and that during the 3 days he saw about 150 policemen injured, mostly by stones, but some of them by petrol bombs.